There we go. We're recording the meeting for you. And we'll go ahead with an introduction here by David Minnick.
Welcome to the March 2025 of the Oregon Archaeological Society. Our special guest tonight is Dr. Jim Kaiser. Jim earned his PhD in anthropology from the University of Oregon. He is an internationally respected as an expert in rock art studies and the author of 250 publications that address rock art, robe art, or ledger art. Jim has led the OAS Rock Art Research Group for 30 years and is a three-time president of the Society. Under his guidance, the Rock Art Group has conducted more than 20 major projects and published over 50 professional reports with contributions from OAS volunteers. Jim's newest book with co-author David Kaiser is War Stories, Reading Plains Biographic Rock Art. Tonight, he will be speaking on War Stories, Biographic War Paintings on Plains War Horses. Please join me in welcoming Jim Kaiser.
Thank you, David. Okay, hey, I'm glad to be here. And tonight's talk's going to be a little bit different, a little bit out of the normal. It's going to have some rock art in it. Of course, it has to have some rock art in it, and some robe art in it, and some ledger art in it. But mostly, it's going to be about what the Indians drew on their horses. So this one is the star of the show. There are others that are equally cool, but this one is the Blackfoot Chief Mourning Eagle. And the guy that took this picture, Walter McClintock, called this Mourning Eagle's advertising horse. And you'll see a little bit more of this later. So first, when we talk about horses war paint, we have to dispense with most of the hogwash you see on the internet about how Indians painted up their horses. Here's two. I just picked two random ones off the internet. I could have had a dozen more. And if you look at this, those five circled on the left, the ones in green are correct. They, like my professor used to say, even the blind hog finds an acorn now and again. And the ones over there, the blue are, well, the green ones are correct. The parts I've crossed out are the parts that are not correct in those. The blue one makes the horse's fences stronger. And he's talking about the eye, the circle around the eye. And that's probably correct, although that's just lucky. They just made that up. We don't know that's what that is, but probably that's what that is. Same over there, that's same idea. That's just made up. But here's the ones that are wrong. That are just, that's the hogwash part, and there's more hogwash, okay? Now, where do all that US come from? Where and why is all that stuff on the internet, and where did they get that? Well, that we know a lot about. What you're looking at there is a page out of the 1929 and 1926 Boy Scout Handbook. That's Indian signs and how you can read them. And if you look at that thing right there, it's exactly the one right in the middle. And there's 4 or 5 pages of that in the Boy Scout Handbook. And that's where they pick that stuff up. And, it's just made up. It's just, and people buy right into it. I've had people tell me, I know that bad luck on the enemy is the broken arrow. Well, no, it's not. It's just a joke. Fortunately, if we ignore the crap on the internet, we know a lot of stuff about why and how and for what purpose Indians painted their horses. We know they painted their war horses in 2 primary ways for 2 main reasons. First of those reasons is a set of designs we can think of as medicine paintings that talk about power, spiritual power, supernatural power. Okay? These are intended to indicate a horse's supernatural or special qualities, or to emphasize those qualities. Okay. And the first one that we see pretty much everywhere is we call lightning legs. You see the zigzag lines running down the horse's, the front and back legs, and with a big circle there. That's a crow device, that circle. Most tribes did not paint the circle in the lightning legs. The crows did that. But and often that lightning legs doesn't run clear up to the horse's neck. It's usually just down the leg. But we know what that is. Now it occurs in rock art. There's an example. That actual piece of rock art was drawn by Crazy Horse just before the Custer battle. We know that. Here's a photo tracing of that drawing. It no longer exists. Somebody went there in the 1960s and thought, well, it's deteriorating. You can see that big white patch in the front. It's deteriorating. I'll protect it. I'll swab some varnish on it. It's a special kind of varnish for stucco buildings. And all that did was cause all the water behind it to build up and freeze and pop the whole thing right off. And it fell down on the ground and broke to bits. But there is the photo tracing with the background removed. And you can see the lightning leg running down that back leg. There's actually one on the front leg too. When we got a second photograph of that, we were fortunate to find one. We could see the front leg one too. So there you have it in rock art. You have the same design that we see in these ledger drawings. The second medicine painting that's really common and that occurs in rock art is what we call bear's eyes. This drawing, let me back up one. This drawing is by Matotope. He's a Four Bears. He's a Mandan chief, and his name is Four Bears. Look at the bear skin leg he uses for a saddle blanket. Well, if you look closely, you see the eye of his horse has a red tear streak coming out of it. That indicates if you're a crow or a Hidatsa or a Mandan or an Arikara, that indicates that's a bear's eye. That's the bears have a tear streak like that. So that means bear. Well, there it is in rock art. That's a piece of crow rock art. See, do I have a pointer on this, Julia? And this one right here. No?
Here, I'll show you. It's this red line right here.
Okay.
Just the very top button.
Aha, there. So you can see there, and you see there's two eyes on this side of the horse's head. There's the horse's nose. The two eyes on the side of the head is what's called twisted perspective. Look at your Peanuts cartoon in tomorrow morning's paper, and you'll see the same thing. Snoopy has two eyes on the same side of his head. So it's twisted perspective, but you see there's two of those tear streaks coming out of the eyes. There they are. And there's the tracing of that. Okay. So we see these designs in robe art, which you saw, ledger art, which you saw, and in rock art, which you saw. So we know what they mean. There's good ethnography of that. You don't have to look in the Boy Scout handbook to figure this out or to make mistakes about it. We know exactly what they mean and why they did it. But our focus tonight will be on biographic war paintings that were painted on horses. You do a whole paper. I could do this, an entire paper, just like I'm doing on this, on the medicine designs too. We just don't know quite as much about them as we do about the biographic paintings. And the question is on someone's mind out there, I suspect. Why is that? Why do we know more about the biographic paintings? Because biographic paintings happen on many different media. So there's more chance that people talk about them in different venues. Medicine paintings only happen on your horse. So typically on your horse. So there's more limited chances for folks to talk about them. Okay, these war paintings on horses, war paint, if you would. Almost all Plains tribes painted up their horses like this. All the Northern Plains tribes we know, and also the peripheral Northern Plains tribes, the Flathead, the Nez Perce, probably the Kootenai, but we don't have a picture of any Kootenai horse with war paint on it. You come over here in the plateau with the Nez Perce and the Colvilles, they did it. We just have a few scattered pictures of those. As early as the 1830s, we've got evidence of this. In the paintings of Carl Bodmer and George Catlin, we actually see painted horses that those guys saw and painted pictures of. And we've got the writings of Sir George Simpson and Alexander Ross in the 1820s and 1830s. And they wrote about horses that are painted up in this way. Here's a picture by Carl Bodmer. This is an aqua tint. It's a drawing that he has, a painting that he did that's been turned into a print. But right here on your stage is Prince Maximilian. Carl Bodmer that's his hand. But here's his French interpreter, his voyageur interpreter, talking to the Hidatsa chief who's showing off his horse to Prince Maximilian. And look at his horse right there. See the paintings on it? So that's 1832. Okay. So we know they're out there and going on. This is a long time thing. Indians did it for 100 years at minimum, and probably as long as they had horses. They're less common in ledger drawings, but they do occur. We're going to look at some a little later as ledger drawings. Here you see some interesting ones. There's handprints painted on the horse's neck, what we call the black wound here. Those aren't real wounds on that horse. Those are painted wounds to show the horse has been wounded. And these are coup stripes all the way from the hip down onto the leg. And you ask yourself, why would you paint the places where the horse has been wounded? Well, that shows the horse was in the thick of the fight, and presumably you're riding the horse, so that means you're in the thick of the fight, okay? And you get a bounty point for that in the Plains war system, system of war honors. But our best source for these, our best source for seeing these Plains war paintings on horses is the early photographers from 1890s to 1920s. And there's a list of them, and I will read the list, but guys like Walter McClintock and F.A. Reinhardt and Willem Wildschut, Edward H. Booz, those guys took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and if you page through those pictures, these gems just keep popping up. So why is that? Why so many photographs of these horses by these guys? Well, think of it this way. What's happening in this period from 1890 to 1920? First thing that's happening, Indians have been confined to reservations. Plains Indians have been confined to reservations. Second thing that's happened, they can't make war anymore. Third thing that's happened, their social systems haven't quit working. So chiefs still have to have the same system to be and maintain their status as chiefs. They still have to brag about their war records to keep being chiefs. Fourth thing that's happening, there's no more buffalo robes for them to wear with their war record painted on them. So what do you do instead? You paint up your horse, even more than you did 100 years earlier when Carl Bodmer is wandering around and Prince Maximilian and George Catlin. And the last thing is there's powwows happening, because that takes the place. You can't do the Sundance anymore, or most groups didn't get to do the Sundance anymore. You can't do war dances anymore, because the Indian agents make you stop that. But everybody can do a powwow. So at the powwow, you paint up your horse and you lead him around or you ride him around. and you show off your war record. So you can still maintain this. See, I'm a chief because I did all these things that are painted here on my horse. The Blackfeet even had a name for the thing that happened at powwow. They called it the riding big dance. Big meaning big man. Big meaning important man. So the riding big dance happened at these powwows. Okay, so early photographers. Excuse me, yes, Curtis. Crows. Look at that. There's 5 crow Indian chiefs there. Look at that guy's horse, all painted up with crew stripes on the butt. And see the handprint right there? If you look carefully at a lot of E.S. Curtis paintings, you spot these horse paintings in them. We also have excellent ethnographic information. Again, we don't have to rely on the Boy Scout handbook. We have a fellow named Ben Pease, who was a mixed blood Crow man. And we'll talk about Ben Pease in a minute. We'll talk about him in a minute. We also have a guy named Red Plume. He was a Pagan man. He was an informant to David Duval, who was a mixed blood interpreter for Clark Whistler among the Pagan, the Montana's Blackfeet. And Red Plume drew these beautiful drawings that show exactly how you paint your horse. Here you've got a wound right here. Here you've got a lineup of guns and bows that you captured. And these are 3 horse raiding expeditions you've been on. So when we talk about these exploit paintings on horses, these war paintings, we can group them into 3 major categories. We can talk about battle actions that actually show people fighting one another. We can talk about tallies, lists of things that happened in a battle or battles, and honor marks. And honor marks are symbols that stand for battle actions or tallied things or whatever. You'll get to see them all. So Morning Eagle, that guy we talked about on the first slide, Morning Eagle painted all 3 of those on what McClintock called his advertising horse. There's that picture I showed. Here's a little bit of a close-up. Now, let me point out here that this is not a color picture. And you're going, well, of course it's a color picture, Kaiser. No, this is not a color picture. This is what's called a lantern slide. This is a black and white picture that somebody carefully hand colored. Okay, so parts get left out. If Mrs. Frida Jones in Cincinnati, Ohio is coloring this and she doesn't understand the language, she may say, oh, well, that's not an important sign to put on here, and she leaves it out. But if you look really carefully, you can see the leg and hind end of another horse right here. Here? That's Morning Eagle. Morning Eagle is actually riding this horse, leading his advertising horse through the camp in the morning. So that's how you know when you look at this, you know that it's a picture of what was there, but it's had to be sort of recopied, okay? So what I did, I found 4 different pictures or 5 of Morning Eagle's horse, taken slightly different views and colored slightly different ways, and came up with that as a tracing of Morning Eagle's horse. And you can look at it, and you can see some discrepancies. First thing you notice over here, no dot on the cheek. That's a wound spot. Notice here, no dot here. That's a wound spot. The person, it was a woman who colored these, she just didn't realize that was important. That's just a spot. No. Morning Eagle would have said, no, you got to put those spots on there. They're important. And if you look carefully here, look here. There's no picket rope for this guy to be cutting here. This guy isn't really a guy. He's just a smudge. In here, that's just a blob, see? No, those are very careful three-sided squares. So all that had meaning to Mourning Eagle and every Blackfoot that saw that. They would have known immediately what was going on there. And you can read that just like a book. This is 3 bows and arrows. And these are exact. When they got the robe from they showed Shorty Whitegrass's war honors, somebody asked, well, couldn't you just make those up? And he said, no, you'd be laughed out of your chieftainship if you made stuff up. These are exact records. There's a lot of the story that you have to tell. These don't tell the entire story, but what's here is absolutely true. So Mourning Eagle captured a bow and 2 arrows, a bow and 3 arrows, and a bow and 4 arrows. He captured a feathered lance, 4 guns. That's a tally of weapons that he captured over the course of his military career. His horse was wounded once in the hip. He cut 2 horses from in front of enemy teepees. That's him with a knife in hand. That's a picket pin right there. See that little Y shape? He snuck into enemy camps at night, unobserved, and cut those 2 horses and took them away. Those are when the enemy warrior of renown had his best horse, he picketed them right in front of his teepees, presumably to keep them safe. But Mourning Eagle was careful enough and sneaky enough that he could sneak into camp and cut the horse right in front of the teepee and take it away. Beautiful story. I think it's a James Willard Schultz story about one of the guys told him that the chief inside the teepee had the horse actually picketed to his wrist. And when the Indian who stole it started sawing on the rope, he woke the chief up inside, who grabbed his gun and leaned out the teepee door and shot at him, and so the story goes. But my point is, these are exact representations of what happened. Here, he rides down an enemy. Here, he takes a horse from an enemy riding at him. Here, he rescues a comrade. He participated in 5 horse raids. Here, this is called a trampling coup hand. There's a similar hand painted just on the other side of this horse's neck, right on the breast. You'll see it later. And here he was wounded in the chest and wounded in the jaw. Okay? So you can just read right across there. You see exactly what happened in Mourning Eagle's career as a warrior. So remember I said they didn't have buffalo robes anymore. So they couldn't walk around camp advertising themselves on their buffalo robes. So they had to do more of it on their horses. This is Carl Bodmer painting from 1832 of a Blackfoot guy, a pagan man, and he's advertising the same things you see on Mourning Eagle's horse on his buffalo robe. And you can just, you walk right through here. Here's a tally of weapons he's stolen and horses he's taken. And here's a fortification with dead enemies in it and his guys surrounding it. And here's more weapons he's taken and all this. Well, this is how close these things are. This is how similar they are. Essentially 100 years apart. This McClintock picture was taken in 1908. This is 1932, so 80, 70, 79 years apart. See this wound spot on the cheek? See the wound spot on the cheek right there? Same stuff, 80 years apart. So this is the quality of the ethnographic information we have. Here's Ben Pease. We'll talk about the guy on the right here first. Oh, Jesus. Okay, here's the guy on the right, Ben Pease. Now, these drawings are in a book that I think is William Kerner, right here. William Kerner was a painter, sort of a poor man's Charlie Russell. And he was painting Crow Indians and riding their horses and shooting ups with Sioux Indians and whatnot. And Ben Pease was one of his informants. And he painted a bunch of these paintings, and Ben Pease wrote him a letter. That's the letter Ben Pease wrote. And he said, no, you've got this all wrong. We didn't paint our horses like this. Here's how we painted our horses. And it's hard to read, but these are medicine symbols. This is lightning. This means speed. He got another painting, I don't have it on here. We put a big dot on each on the hip and on the shoulder, along with the lightning streaks to show speed. Here, this is a hand we touched an enemy in battle. This is a hand where we trampled over an enemy. This white spots are we forded the river somewhere. I think it's a long involved thing here. There we go. So here's Ben P. Here's Red Plume, and you remember you saw this drawing from Red Plume here. Well, here's the other three, and I mean he just got these are amazing details, and this one is the one you should commit to memory. This is the trampling coup. The trampling coup is when you train your horse. Horses do not want to do this. We've all seen Roy Rogers or Tex Ritter or one of those early cowboys, and the horse is rearing up like this when the guy's down here holding the rope. Horses do not want to walk on people. They try not to. They rear up. You train your horse to run, to walk, to trample right over an enemy, to stomp your enemy into the ground. When you successfully train him to do that, and when you do one of those, you get to paint that picture of Mr. Roadkill right on the front of your horse's breast, okay? The other way you can do that is you can just paint a handprint here and a handprint here. Sort of like the guy's going, God, as the horse runs right over the top of it, okay? So, you can see wounds and coup stripes and captured weapons and all kinds of stuff. And here is that circled eye. And it just says what Ben Pease said about it is a medicine eye. So we don't know what it did, but we can assume that it increases the acuity of vision so that horse can see better. That's what we assume is going on there. So, going back to that the silly boy scout stuff, we'll need that. We've got really, really good information about what that is, what those images were. So let's look at some examples now that that's your introduction. That's the introductory paragraph to a paper you just spent 20 minutes snoozing through. Here's some images in a ledger book. This is the Crow ledger book. Now you can all pick them out. You don't even need me. I can just shut up and run the clicker. Wound, coup stripes. Here's a second coup mark right there. See that? Among the crow, an X is the first coup. An X with a single stripe or dot in any or all of the four angles is a second coup. If you put two dots or stripes in any or all of those, it's a third coup, et cetera, down to four. Okay? And there's the trampling hand. See him right here? Okay? And this, we don't know. That's a medicine thing there. This likewise is a medicine thing. That is also a medicine painting. And we don't know what those mean. There's another one from the Caffeine Ledger. Here's a third one from the Caffeine Ledger. And you can see wounds, coup stripes. And here we've got the encircled eye, here and here. And the coup stripes sometimes are really pretty fancy. And, this horse is covered with wounds, see? Okay. But like I said, most examples we see are in photographs. And these interest me a lot more than ledger drawings in terms of this particular. So here we'll talk battle actions. Remember, there are three three groups of these: battle actions, tallies, and what was the third one? Zeke? Battle actions, tallies, and symbols. Okay. This McClintock photo, 1909, it's entitled "Parade: Men and Women." Look at the hip on that horse right there, and look what's painted on it. Cool stuff. Coup stripes on the leg, a horse ride symbol. Here's the guy actually taking the horse from in front of the enemy teepee. Here's a fortification with 7 enemies in it, and me and my guys surrounding it to do them in. And a wound spot. This guy's name was not Joe Healy to his friends, neighbors, and family. His name was actually Wolf Moccasin. 1907, this is an Arthur Rafton Canning. He worked in Lethbridge, Alberta. He took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures of the Bloods, North Pagans, and they're marvelous pictures. And there you see that same fortification with the people around the outside and the enemy inside. Tallies can show just about anything. You can tally just about anything. You can tally enemies that you've counted coup on or killed. You can tally weapons you've stolen. You can tally horses you've stolen. You can tally horse raids you've been on. You can tally just about anything. So here's a guy, again, his Indian name was Ice. His name was Bill Jones to the white folks. Charlie Russell has a great story about this. Everybody, he thought it, he really did. Bill, Ice thought his American name was son of a bitch Bill Jones. Because that's what he got called all the time. Well, Charlie Russell has a great story about it. Anyway, Ice is at a Grove on Sundance in 1905. Okay. And Morehouse? Anyway, can't remember the photographer's name, but Matson, Sonny Matson. He took this picture of him, and then he took this picture of him. Same Sundance. One side, the other side. See, he's got tallies on both hips, knife, hatchet, bow, quiver, gun. You got enemies tallied here, and a wound right there. Okay. Now, Charlie Russell is over here around the Sundance Lodge or under that umbrella, and that's important, and you'll see why in a moment. But let's just admire that. That's, you know, in many ways, that's as, to me, that's as interesting a war painting as Mourning Eagle's horse. Because Ice could paint that and ride that horse around. He didn't have to lead him as a billboard. That horse is painted up as Ice would have painted him when he went to war. You know, Mourning Eagle didn't paint that white horse and go to war on him like that. But Ice would have painted that horse just like that to go to war. Important point to remember. Okay. So, here's Charlie Russell and his wife Marie at that wagon at that Sundance. How come that's important? Well, Charlie Russell was an excellent observer of all things Indian and an excellent copyist of all things Indian. When he put things in his paintings about Indians, you can go to the bank that that's the way they really looked. Ethnographers look at Charlie Russell paintings. I have done so too. Look at Charlie Russell paintings and go, oh, that's what that looked like. That's how that was used. Because he went to these celebrations on the Gorgon Reservation, the Blackfoot Reservation, the Blood Reservation in Alberta, the Crow Reservation, and he studied how they used them, what they looked like, how they were done. Okay? And here you see. Look at this is a painting, Lewis and Clark Meet the Flatheads. That wound is exactly like the one on Ice's horse. So he painted it, same place, exactly how Ice would have done it. Ice did it. Here's another one. See there? There's the knife. This is painted in a slightly different place, but same idea. And there's the wound, the coup stripes down the leg. Anybody recognize that picture? See? That's a cover picture of the next book we've got coming out. Okay, so remember that. Charlie Russell was at that powwow, at that Sundance, and saw Ice riding his painted horse. Going to be important in a minute. Tallies. This is a guy named Big PL. That's Big PL's wife. And like most ethnography, the guy's name's important, and then it's Big PL's wife. Well, come on, her name was important too, just nobody captured it. But look at that horse. She's riding his horse in the first picture. He's riding his horse in the second picture. Same encampment, same year, 1906. This guy, Big PL, I went to school with some of his grandkids. Okay. Their name by that point was Pierre, because when you speak Salish, you can't say Pierre, you say PL. But this guy was a hell of an accomplished warrior, if you look at this. He's got like 13, 16 horses stolen. When you're a Salish, a Ponderay, that doesn't mean a horse raid. That means an actual horse taken. Here's coup stripes, wound spot, more coup stripes here. And see this hand and that hand, one on each side, remember? That's the trampling coup. And there's the stolen horse symbol when you're a Ponderay or a Salish. Okay, let's talk about that trampling coup. We think about it as the roadkill coup. Okay, there's Red Plume's drawings up here. And here's one that's described by Grinnell. Grinnell talked to some old Blackfeet guys, and they said, "No, we didn't paint the whole guy on the front. We just painted his two hands as if he's trying to push back on the horse as the horse stomps him into the ground." But they drew this act when they painted it on robes or in rock art or in ledgers. It's too small to try and paint this, so they painted the act on those in those other media. Here's a robe art from 1880s or so. Here you see, there's the horse, there's the guy, he's fallen over, there's the horse tracks going right across the top of him, okay? Here it is, red feather, different Red Plume. This is a flathead guy. Here's the guy falling down underneath the horse, who's rearing up and stomping right across the top of him. Here's a piece of rock art riding on stone. Couldn't be any plainer. Horse on top of the guy, falling down, falling backwards. So that's what that looks like in rock art, ledger art, robe art. But when we see it painted on horses, it looks like one of those. Oh, gee, I got ahead of my. So here, here's two leggings. Bill and Vince took this picture sometime between 1917 and 1923, and take a look there. Two leggings and 4 or 5 of his buddies reenacted the last Crow War Party, which was in 1880 something, I can't remember. And they rode after a bunch of Sioux that had stolen some horses from where they were at Crow Agency. Tim McCleary, a friend of mine and a guy I work with doing this stuff, that's a picture of his backyard. He owns that property now, and he can go touch that tree that's right behind Two Leggings' horse. But see the white hands painted there? So that's, we know exactly what that means. Well, the Crows didn't paint the whole guy. They only painted hands. The Blackfeet painted them both. And look back here. There, you see that hand coming out around the side of the horse? There's a little enlargement. Damn, we just can't see the front of that horse well enough. But that's what it is, clearly. Here's another example. This is a McClintock photograph, and you just go, why didn't anybody take a photograph of the front of the horse? Because, you know, they're interested in that beautiful saddle blanket and the guy's ermine feather-fringed coat and his shield and all that. I don't care about that. I want to look at the paint on the horse. If you look carefully, you can kind of get a little hint here of paint. There's a little hint there. There's a wound spot on his cheek, but you just don't see very much. Well, remember Charlie Russell? He's at those powwows and celebrations and riding big dances. Thank God for Charlie Russell, because we know what that looks like. Because there it is, right there. But the interesting thing to me, as I was paging through all these, flipping through all these McClintock photographs of Blackfeet guys, hoping somebody took a picture of a horse from the front with that guy painted on it. Here's what pops up. There's a guy who trampled over the horse and the rider at the same time and painted that on the front of his horse. You can see the rider, he's obscured behind the horse's mane there. But that's the horse and there's the rider. That guy did the ultimate. He stomped over the top of the horse and the guy riding it. That's never before been found, been seen, been recorded. And here it is in a McClintock photograph from 1908. This is a scalp dance parade. Okay, other tribes painted these. As I said, the Blackfeet were real photogenic. And Walter McClintock is up there with unlimited supply of film. And he takes photographs after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. He also wrote an opera about these Indians. It's kind of crazy. But other tribes also painted up like this. There's a broken arm, a Lakota guy, wound spot and a handprint. Here's a Stony guy. We don't know what his name is. But if you look very carefully, you'll see there's a handprint right there, a handprint there. You look over here, here's a Lakota warrior. He's doing what's called an Omaha dance. It's not an Omaha Indian, it's an Omaha dance. And those are all wounds on his horse. 1, 2, maybe one up there, it's hard to tell. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And coup stripes all over the rump and down the leg. Here, as late as 1928 at Crow Fair, there you've got a horse, a pair of horses pulling a wagon with coup stripes on the rump and a handprint on the, a trampling coup handprint on the front. So lots and lots of these pictures, if you're kind of following along here. Here's some more, just some random ones. This F.A. Reinhardt photograph. This is really interesting here. This is a McClintock photograph. See those X's? If this was a Crow guy, those would be coup marks. Among the Blackfeet, they're not. Those are picket pins. Those represent horses that Cream Antelope, the rider, snuck into an enemy camp and stole 7 horses that were picketed in front of the guy's teepee. So 7 times he snuck into a camp and stole those horses. Now the guy in the middle is called Blood. And if you look carefully, you'll see he's got a wound spot here, coup stripes painted across the nose. The next guy over there is Mountain Chief. And here's one of those lantern slides colored. I'm sure that's a trampling coup. See, there's the guy's hand and arm, but it's all just kind of, the colorist just went flop, 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 and and did something there. So pretty cool. Here's cream antelope the next year, painted his horse completely differently. Lots of coup stripes on the hip and on the breast, but on the cheek, he's got those 4 coup stripes connected by a line. It's the only example I've been able to find of that, but it's a specific marker. Here's a guy named Big Moon. Really cool stuff here. Big Moon's got battle actions galore. Here he's fighting a guy. Here he's fighting a guy. He's on a horse and he's killing that guy. These are scout service symbols. These little mushroom caps with the wiggly line. Here he's got all kinds of horse riding expeditions, and it goes all the way up the horse's leg and up onto its shoulder. McClintock didn't identify this guy, but you see it's about 8 years earlier than the rest of these. Actually, more. It's 10 years, 12 years earlier. And this is a guy participating in the riding big dance. He says horseback dancer, but it's the riding big dance. When you look at this, there's one of those scout service symbols here. Here's a better picture of it and a drawing of it. That's the Blackfoot Scout Service symbol. Know it anywhere. But look at the back. There's coup stripes. And look, he rescued a comrade in a fight. 2 guys riding the same horse. So the riding big dance. This is a muslin painting by a guy named Nightshoot, a South Pagan guy, in 1893. Nightshoot was too young to have gone to war. He was only 19 years old when he painted this, or 18 or 16 in 1893. So he's too young to have participated in warfare, but he saw this riding big dance, and unfortunately, he didn't know a lot of the symbolism. He wasn't comfortable with a lot of the symbolism because he's a young guy. And you have to remember, all the ethnographers said it. All the old Indian guys said, you don't have to write all this down. I'm happy that you're writing this down because the young people don't listen anymore and they will forget. They will never know what all this means. And you can look through this if you know Blackfoot ethnography. You see this? This is called a thing to tie on the halter. It's all about how it makes the horse run fast and avoid stepping in prairie dog holes and stuff. Look, here he's got it tied in his tail. Never did that. Never did that. So there's some stuff that's wrong here. But if you start looking, look at this horse is painted up, this horse is painted up, this horse is painted up, this horse, this horse, this horse, this horse. So he got some of this right. If you go close up, you'll see some of it is half right. Here, he's turned that scout service symbol into lightning legs, and that's not what they were. That's a scout service symbol. It should look like this one. It does not look like this one. So he got some of it right and some of it wrong, but he's got them, handprints, scout service, coup stripes, horse raid symbols, So that's really interesting because here we see sort of the beginning of the breakdown of this system, and now you see it if you go to Crow Fair, or if you go to a powwow, an Indian powwow. See these horses painted up in all sorts of ways that don't make any sense anymore. Although there is some effort to bring back this system. There's a guy on YouTube now, a Lakota guy, who talks about horse painting, and he explains it using traditional meanings for these things, and he's got most of them correct. So do we have these marks in rock art? The answer is yes, a resounding yes. See the battle hand on the hip? That when you put that hand on the rear hip, that shows you've touched an enemy in a fight. See the X picket pin? That's it, riding on stone on that horse there on his hip. Now this is an interesting one. This is a Cheyenne honor mark. This one, this rock art's in the Picketwire Canyonlands in Colorado. That's on a Cheyenne ledger drawing. Same mark. This guy's got two of them here. This horse, see, 1, 2. That's not. That's feathers coming off of his lance. But 1, 2 equals, equal signs. We don't know what that means. Nobody thought to ask anyone, and there's no indication. Some artists, some guys who write about ledger drawings have said that that's just a symbol for speed, but that's not it. It's an honor mark of some sort. And finally, you get this. There's a captured knife painted on. Well, it's not painted. This is in size. This is a petroglyph, but it represents a knife that was painted on that horse in real life. Okay, there we go. That's it. Thanks to these folks, especially Tim McCleary, Bud Lake, George Miles, Mark Fritch at the U of M Archives, Arnie Brownstone, and all those early photographers, and all those old Indians who painted up their horses like that. No questions.
8 are they?
Eight.
Just regular paint?
What?
Are they?
It's all, come on, it's 1890. These are commercial pigments. Now, when it's 1830, they could be commercial pigments, or they could be, ochre pigments, whatever. Yeah. There you go. You can't paint a blanket very well, but they show up on muslins. That remember night sheets painting, that's on a muslin. They show up on robes. They show up on pretty much anything you can paint. This stuff shows up on it. But you run a step back from horses. They didn't paint those because they painted their horses. They painted horses because they painted practically everything, and horses are just one piece of that action.
25, 30 years.
They're all the rider's symbols, except for the wounds on the horse. But that horse may collect all the wounds from all the horses that guy's taken into the fight. Probably. That's a hard question to ask, to answer, because nobody ever thought to ask anybody about it.
We know how far back the marking system goes, and also how far back the horses go. Do they go to the 1500?
Horses go to, on the plains here, horses go to about 1700 on the northern plains. By 1830, we know they're painting them up like that. We can assume that they started painting them probably about 1705. And I mean, they just, as soon as they started making war, those symbols were loose, and we know that the symbology, the biographic art was in use before they got the horse. So that system was native designed and native used before they met Europeans. So as soon as they got horses, I'm sure they just went, oh, well, this is a billboard we can paint up. Okay, we got some questions from the audience. This is okay. Yeah. So the question from the Zoom audience is where all the photographs come from, and start looking at this thanks to a lot of those photographs, like spotted jackrabbit, and those came from a guy named Bud Lake, who has a wonderful collection of crow photographs. Tim McCleary shared some photographs with me. George Miles, who curates the Western Americana collection at the Biographic Library, was the one who got me into the Walter McClintock collections. Mark Fritch at the University of Montana Archives, collection, I think it's called, has a lot of E.H. Boone stuff and E.S. Curtis stuff and some Walter McClintock photographs. those others. So they're scattered all around. The Arthur Rafton Cairns photographs are from the museum at Lethbridge. So you just got to kind of start looking for Indians on horses and on the internet, and you find them all over.
Next question, you mentioned today's powwows and how indigenous horses are not painted traditionally or accurately. May you recognize the reason for this, as well as how you have shared your knowledge to the indigenous tribes represented in your research?
That's not a question, that's a dissertation. So the question was, I talked about how today's powwow horses are often not painted in these traditional ways. How come is that? And then the next part of that question was, have I shared my knowledge with these people? Okay, why is that so? And have I shared my knowledge of this? Well, there's the three questions in there. Number one, today's horses, first of all, most people who ride a horse in a powwow haven't gone out and scalped somebody. So it's hard to paint traditional war honors on a horse if you haven't done them. That's really not allowed. Secondly, that system of war honors sort of it's died out. It's not in use as a regular system. That's why this Lakota guy who's on YouTube is so interesting. He is resurrecting it. He has gone back and done the sorts of studies I've done and found these things and talked to old Indians and what I don't know, and he's discovered what these marks mean. And so he's talking about this is how we painted our horses. I don't know if he paints his own horses for powwows or not. So that's why they don't get painted typically. Have I shared my knowledge? This is all brand new, folks. This is hot off the presses. This is not yet published. It will soon be published. And no, the answer is I haven't shared this knowledge. I'm not antagonistic to sharing it, but there's really no means to share. As soon as it's published, of course, it will be made available.
Did the paint come from just how we paint maintenance for?
Oh, okay. That question goes back to the first question. We're talking in the 1890s to the 1820s. You could go down to the Sears store and buy this paint. It's paint like you and I could have. Okay. If you go like earlier to 1830, it's probably trade paint that they bought at the trading post. Some of it could be paints like they painted, rock art with. But by the time they're painting bison robes in the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, most of those are trade pigments. So vermilion and copper paint, copper-based paints and whatnot. So when they're painting that on buffalo robes, they're using that same paint to paint their horses. These are commercial pigments they're buying at trading posts or the Sears store if it's 1920.
I'm just wondering, the Lakota guy that you're looking at YouTube,
I don't remember his name. I found him just by Googling Indian painted horses and he pops right up. Sundance? Sundance is a world renewal ceremony that the Plains Indians practice, and it's very involved. Has a lot of stuff. Certain people can do it. You put it on. You host it. You have to do a purification thing, et cetera, et cetera. It's beyond my pay grade.
They'd be laughed out of camp. Oh, sorry. It's easier for you to hand it to me. You mentioned earlier that they'd be laughed out of camp if they just made something up and painted on their horse. Did they still rely on the warrior societies for this kind of art like they did for other coups?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. All of these war honors are individual honors. These are not group honors. These are not corporate honors. These are all individual. But how they relied on the warrior society is that serves as a check and balance, okay? You got to get up in front of your peers and say, I did this, and this is what happened. And you went through the whole Shaggy Dog story. We walked 4 days and 4 nights down to Crow Country. We hid out in the brush. We waited till it was nighttime. And then we snuck into camp. And I snuck in and I fed the dogs a piece of buffalo jerky so they wouldn't bark. And I snuck up to the camp, to the teepee, and I cut the rope on that stallion, that white stallion that's the best horse, and blah, blah, blah. And I took him back out. You told the whole story with great detail. And then you said, and everybody knows that's true because I still have that white stallion. And everybody else, yeah, that's true. That's true. You did that. And that's how you got the okay. That was your war honor, and you could claim that. And you had to tell that in front of the group and get it, the USDA seal of approval stamped on it. And then you could put that on your robe or on your horse or on your leggings or on your teepee or whatnot. And what they said was, you didn't make those up. There's no way. If you claim something you didn't do, and sometimes this happened, and so he said, yes, I rode up in the fight, and I was the first guy to touch that crow guy who wore the big headdress, and somebody else said, no, I was the first guy. They had knockdown dragouts. I was the first guy to touch him. No, I was. And finally, they had arbiters who said, well, we saw it all, and you were the first guy to touch him. You get first and you get second. And that's how they decided those things. So those were Warrior Society meetings, but in front of the whole assembled village, they would do that, and they would work those things out. And not without some rancor between individual warriors. And, no, I did it. No, you did it. I did it. I did it. There, back.
Tail, the horse's tail got one bell when it was green bell, broke 2 bells when it was broke for carrying, driving, and everything. Did other than the warrior hand for trampling, was there anything like that they showed on a horse for being really well trained or anything?
Not that I'm aware of. Good question, but I suspect it didn't last very long. Yeah, because you see, I mean, yeah, okay. The question is, how long did the paint last? It's a picture. It lasts, it's a moment in time. It's there, and that's all you know. There's no indication of how long it lasted, but I suspect it didn't last all that long. The horse rolls and rubs in the dirt, rolls down, and it's out of there in pretty short order, I'd suspect.
The coup stripes, is that like a combat mission or combat sortie?
Yeah. And some of those coup stripes are the one decoration that there's some real question as to whether those are actual counts or whether those just mean I fought lots of times, because we've got some conflicting ethnographic information that says some of those are actual counts. I went to battle 13 times, but other guys, got 72 stripes on their blanket or their robe or their whatever. And you kind of go, well, probably not 72. That probably means I've been there a lot. So there's some conflict over whether the stripes mean actual numbers or just some, many, lots, a real lot.
Is there other societies in the world or nomadic societies that have these horses have the same similar type of symbols they paint on horses? Is this just for North America or the other side? Other societies have using horses quite a
Question is, are there other societies that paint their horses like this? Answer is, I'm a Plains Indian guy and I wouldn't have any idea. Sorry. Yes, the whole biographic art system is a system of writing that was developed by the Plains Indians. And if we'd have left them alone, they would have developed a system of picture writing, much like the Egyptians. Question?
I was gonna ask. If there's any dating on the rock.
Is there any dating on some of the rock art? How old was?
Do you have any idea of how old was?
Yeah, there is. Elizabeth asks, is there any dating of the rock art? The answer is yes, lots. We've got rock art dates in North America, the good dates that go back 7, 8, 9,000 years. Some questionable dates that go back older than that. But on this biographic art, we've got some really good dates that go back to pre-contact, on the northern plains. So we know they were painting images like this, tallies of guys that they counted coup on before they first saw white people, okay, Europeans. They had, and we date those because of the size of the shields they use. And because we know that when they first got the horse, the shields immediately shrunk in size because you can't take a shield that goes from your Adam's apple to your knees and get on a horse with it with any reasonable sense of being able to move around. So your shield immediately goes from 3 feet in diameter to 18, 20 inches in diameter. And we see that in the rock art. It's very, very easy to see that. So we can immediately date those images that have small shields to post 1725, let's say, and shield pictures that have shields that are bigger than that, most of them to pre-1725. And then if the guys with big shields have metal projectile points on their spears, we know that happens after about 1630s to 1650, because that's when the first metal artifacts show up in the archaeological record. So we've got, if they got a big shield and a metal spear point, we can place it between 1630 and 1730, more or less. If they've got a big shield and no metal projectile points, we can make a pretty reasonable guess date that it predates 1630, so sort of before 1630, 1500, 1550, something like that. So that's how we arrange and make a chronology, construct a chronology of those sorts of paintings. But that's for the biographic art that we're looking at here, the warrior art. If we look at the other art, then we can get into dating and do all sorts of stuff. A colleague of mine, Larry Lohendorf, just dated a piece of rock art in Montana by dating the mineral precipitate that runs over the top of it. It's got calcium carbonate, carbon in it, so he very carefully extracts the carbon from that, and he dated that to AD 300. Okay, we know it was on the wall before the minerals ran down across the top of it at 8,300. And lo and behold, the shield-bearing warrior in it, has an atlatl, a spear thrower, which predates the bow and arrow. And gee whiz, the bow and arrow came into that area about AD 4 to 500. So yeah, it fits perfectly. So that's how we date that rock art. And there's all kinds of other dates, but that's general system.
About some technology things that I read. Fair. So you said, so they painted their fortunes on these horses, and I think I'm trying to figure out, was it before or after that they did the buffalo coats? If it was after, what did they do it on? That horses?
Okay, so that's a good question. The question is, Kaiser, as usual, has flubbed it up and not made himself clear. If you move back to, say, 1850, okay, in 1850, all those Plains Indians had loads of buffalo stomping around. Anybody who wanted one could get his own buffalo robe, okay, tan it and wear it like this. Remember the picture of the guy with the buffalo robe? He could wear it. So you could paint all your war honors on that buffalo robe. And that's pretty easy. You carried it around, kept you warm in the winter, and it was your own advertising that you carried around with you. Okay? You also painted those same war honors on your teepee, which was a buffalo hide teepee. Okay? After about 1870, no more buffalo. They're all gone away. Suddenly, you couldn't paint your war honors on your buffalo robe anymore because you didn't have one. Yeah, you had canvas robes and stuff like that, but they just didn't work the same. So then they started an uptick in painting their horses. That's when everybody started painting their horses then. Previous to 1870, some folks painted their horses, but most of them just painted their robes. They didn't spend a lot of time painting their horses, so we assume. Lots of them painted their horses, but not everybody. But by 1870 to 1890, everybody was painting their horses because they didn't have robes to paint. They also painted their canvas teepees. There's a whole paper waiting to be written about Blackfeet painted teepees with all their war honor paintings on them. So does that kind of clarify that? Okay, perfect.
Projectile points drawn in rock art. How do you know the difference between rock?
How do we know the difference between a metal projectile point shown in rock art and a stone projectile point shown in rock art? The answer is a metal projectile point shows the cross pieces on the stem, okay? And it shows sometimes the quillins, the little corner things at the base of the blade. I'd have to kind of illustrate it for you, but it's real, you know, right away. Oh, that's a metal projectile point. Sometimes you see a big long point and you see the stem of the point and you see one or two or three cross pieces on it. That's the convention that the American Indians used, the Plains Indians, to say this is a metal spear point. And they didn't do that for stone projectile points. Stone projectile points were just triangles. We also did a kind of an interesting study where we looked at size and we sized the spear and we sized the spear point, and we determined that very, very outsized points, the ones that were way bigger than they should be, almost had to be metal because we don't find in the archaeological record stone spear points this big. But we know that they cut down big butcher knives and sword blades and all kinds of stuff to make spear points this big. Good question.
To that, the points, is that a trade item or they actually blacksmith did their own blacksmithing their own point?
They didn't do their own blacksmithing. Question is, did they get the metal points through trade or did they do their own blacksmithing? They didn't do their own blacksmithing, most of them. If they lived around a fort, they could have done that. Those were trade items, or they traded for butcher knives, big butcher knives, and they broke the blade off and then they hammered it out so that it would make a projectile point. They also made arrow points by using chisels and getting things like iron kettles and breaking the iron kettles up and using chisels to cut the arrow points out of the broken pieces of metal. I think we're through. No, got a couple more here. What did the medicine eye symbolize? We don't know. We have an idea that it increased the vision, it increased the awareness of the horse, but that's an educated guess based on what Ben Pease writes, that it's a medicine eye.
And then, do you know if the horses were painted just at a gathering to tell a story, et cetera, or did they paint the horses going into battle, arrayed, et cetera?
Good question. Paint the horses just for the powwows, or did they actually paint them before they went into the fight? And the answer is they painted them for both. When they were actually still fighting in the pre-1870 period, they painted them going into the fight. We have, again, Charlie Russell paints his paintings of that, and these old Indians told him, this is how I painted my horse when I went into the fight. And we see that those those Hidatsas showing off that painted horse to Prince Maximilian. That's a war horse. They would have ridden that horse into a fight. Okay. But they weren't fighting in 1890, so they just painted those up as advertising. Remember, McClintock called Morning Eagle's horse his advertising horse. He painted that horse and he rode it through the camp every morning saying, this is who I am and this is why I'm important and this is why I'm a chief. And you can read it right here, folks. Literally, that's, he said more or less that in Blackfoot. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaiser. Fantastic. Thank you all for showing up today here at OMSI and as well online. And don't forget, April 1st at the OMSI Auditorium, we got Dan Stewart here to tell us about stone technology through replication. So hope to see you all there. Thank you to all our volunteers and everybody in OMSI as well. So thank you. Have a good night. Hey.